everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today's video I'm going to be talking about the differences between therapists, between like an LCPC versus an LMSW or an LCSW versus a psychologist versus a psychiatrist. I know sometimes there's a lot of questions about whether or not these people can provide therapy or the differences between them or whether or not they can prescribe medication. So I'm kind of going to go through a little bit of the differences between them and which ones can prescribe medication and which one may be good for you or which one may be good for you to pursue as a career. So a little bit of background about me. I majored in family and human services in my undergrad. I was super interested in psychology in my junior year of college, and I took a psychology class, and I decided that I eventually wanted it to be like a minor or something in college, and so it did end up being my minor. And yeah, I was always interested in psychology, but I didn't know if I wanted that to be my focus. So I ended up graduating with family and human services with a minor in psychology. The decision to go with social work versus counseling or psychology, personally, I decided to go with social work just because I feel like social work is more of an umbrella term that includes therapy. But the biggest difference is that social work also includes like social justice and policy and advocacy. And you kind of include all of that in your practice. When working with individuals, you bring that into your practice and you have that background knowledge about how social systems and race problems in society kind of affect the individual and their well-being. And to me, that's really the biggest difference. And so I ended up going with social work rather than counseling. As far as social work, there's some schools where you can be in a bachelor's of social work program, and that usually is like 1 year. And so after you finish your bachelor's, when you do go to grad school, it'd only be for 1 year to finish the master's. My undergrad didn't have that, so I ended up going to grad school and did 2 years. You don't have to take like psychology or family services or human services in order to apply for grad school in social work. But I do believe most people have that background, and so that's kind of what I did. I ended up applying to grad school, and in grad school, it's usually coursework and internship or field work. In my first 2 years, I did them simultaneously. So I was taking classes on specific days and then doing my internship on specific days. There's some schools where you take all your classes first and then in the subsequent semesters you do your internships. So it's different based off of the school that you go to, but mine, I did them together. So you have a Bachelor of Social Work if your undergrad has that. Otherwise you can get a degree in pretty much anything. And then when you go to grad school, you get a Master of Social Work. And then after you get your Master of Social Work, you take your license to get your graduate license, which is an LGSW or an LMSW, which is Licensed Master of Social Work. And then you have to work in the field with your license for about 2 years and be supervised to apply for your LCSW, which is your Licensed Clinical Social Work. Once you get your Master of Social Work, you do not have to get your clinical license, which is your LMSW or your LCSW. Most people do if they want to go the clinical route. It's always good to have, but you can also just work in the field just with an MSW. Again, because there's that big macro piece of social work where you can work, in policy and advocacy and nonprofit organizations where you don't have to have your clinical license. But Most people do because it is good to have, just in case. So, yeah, you don't have to get your clinical license, but most people do. You can provide therapy as a social worker. You can work with policy. Some social workers have nonprofit organizations. You can work in child welfare. It's a whole range of things that people can do with a social work degree. Social workers cannot prescribe medication, but oftentimes they may work with psychiatrists or refer clients to psychiatrists. So that's kind of like the gist of social work. And as far as counseling, similar to social work, you have to go to grad school for about 2 years, get your LGPC, which is your licensed graduate professional counselor. And very, very similar to social work, you also have to get your supervision hours and then apply again to get your clinical professional counseling license. So you go from LGPC to LCPC. But the biggest difference between that and social work, as far as the coursework, is that, like I said, social work really has that social justice policy, resource advocacy kind of part to it. Counseling really just focuses on the therapy side of it. Counselors and social workers can both work in like schools. You can both work in, you know, private practice, and things like that. So yeah, they're very similar, but it's based off of what you are interested in. There's that really big macro piece to social work, and then counseling really just focuses on like the skill set and therapy and human development and interaction. So it's, based off of what you're interested in. That's kind of the main difference. The school and education is pretty much the same. So if you're interested in going to school for either one, just think about what you are really interested in and how you want to practice. The next one is psychology. The biggest thing in psychology is psychology is the study of the mind. And so you really do focus on what's going on up here, human development and behavior, how those things connect. Social work and counseling is really also includes environment factors, also includes socioeconomic factors, politics, policy, advocacy, social justice. Psychology, there's some like social workers and counselors who also have a PhD. You don't have to go from undergrad to a master's to a PhD. You can go from undergrad to a PhD in clinical psychology. And so with clinical psychology or counseling psychology, because it is a PhD, you do have to go to school for being a PhD program for about 5 to 6 years. And PhD really is really research based. And so that's really kind of the biggest difference between the master's and a PhD. PhD is super research based, and it also takes longer, about 5 to 6 years. PsyD, and PhD means Doctor of Philosophy in psychology or clinical psychology. PsyD is Doctor of Psychology, and that's also an alternative that some people go with rather than going with a PhD. And sometimes the PsyDs usually it takes less time, so about maybe like 4 years rather than 5 to 6 years. And that is more of clinical and training based, more so than research based. And so a lot of people go that route rather than going the PhD route. With a PhD, you can also provide therapy. And there's very little amount of people who can prescribe medication with a PhD. usually that's reserved for psychiatrists, but I believe you need like special training to be able to prescribe medication as just a psychologist. But again, similar to a counselor and social worker, you can provide therapy. All social workers, counselors, and psychologists know the DSM can diagnose people. Um, and yeah, so that's really the similarities between that. It's just that the education that you have to get is very different. It takes much longer to get a PhD. So it's like 5 to 6 years versus 2 years. As far as psychiatry, like I mentioned before, a lot of the times, therapists, counselors, or social workers or psychologists may work with psychiatrists either directly, or you might refer your patient to them. Depending on the type of agency you're at, you might have a psychiatrist that also works there. I know in my former internships, me and my supervisor and a psychiatrist would literally be in the same room with the patient. And if my supervisor needed to let psychiatrists know about anything that was going on in therapy or whatever, they would let them. And yeah, similarly, they check in with the patients, but psychiatrists mostly focus on the medication management piece of it, trying to see if the medication that they're on is working. They are able to prescribe medication. That's the biggest difference. They're aware of like the DSM. They can diagnose, but that's not really like their job. They're more so focused on how the medication is helping the patient and what medication would be good for the patient's diagnosis, and working with the therapist and communicating with them. So yeah, as far as education, they're technically a actual like medical doctors, have to go to an accredited medical school and have to go through training, have to go through the residency, and you can either earn a doctor of medicine, MD, or a doctor of osteopathic medicine, which is a DO. And so out of every one, it does take the longest to earn the degree and be licensed. And it's also the one that makes the most money. And so, yeah, basically the higher up you go in school, the more money that you make. And so that's kind of like the gist of social workers, counselors, therapists, psychologists, and psychiatrists. Every single license that you get out of any of the ones that I mentioned, you do have to renew your license. So for example, for social workers, we have to renew, I believe, like every 2 years. So I have my graduate license. In 2 years, I have to renew to get my LCSWC. I also have to continue to get, social workers and counselors have to continue to get CE or CEUs, which are continued education credits. And you have to continue to get that and submit to the social work or counseling boards. And that's similar to psychiatrists and psychologists. You have to continue to get education, and you do have to renew your license, and you are, under the boards, and they have the right to audit you and all of those things. So yeah, those are really the main differences. They can all provide therapy, but only psychiatrists are really the ones who can prescribe medication. The rest of them, it's really difference in education and how long you went to school. But as far as the basics and being able to provide therapy, checking in, they all can do the same thing. The differences are within the social justice and social work, and then being able to prescribe medication, and then as a psychologist you have additional clinical training. So that's really the main difference, and it's up to you which one you want to see. And if you are interested in going to school for either one of those. Again, it's really about what you are interested in and what you are interested in doing. So yeah, that's just a little bit about the differences between those two. And if you like this video, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions about either one of the ones I mentioned or whichever one that you are currently interested in, go ahead and give me a comment down below. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.